Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and it's time for the second part of the weekly comic book review. That's right, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. We are finally here to deliver the weekly comic book review part 2. So my city's been dealing with a little bit of an ice/snowstorm, and our shop's been shut down all week. But today, I managed to trek through and make it to the shop so we could process our shipment. We didn't open the store, but I was able to grab the rest of my comics to read. So I'm going to go over what I finished reading today and reveal the cover of the week, the smell of the week, and the pick of the week. So let's kick it off with some Marvel books. We've got Avengers Twilight, issue number 1. I got the foil cover. Maybe I should have grabbed a non-foil cover so that it would look better here with the lights. But this is written by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Daniel Acuna. This is like an alternate future timeline for the Avengers, right? So Captain America is old. He is kind of given up being a hero. Luke Cage is old. Matt Murdock is old, but they're still kind of fighting resistance because most of society now have given up so many of their powers to like whatever represents the government now. So there's all kinds of craziness going on. People can't record things on their own without approval. There's tons of surveillance around. This is the kind of world. One of those typical like high big brother, high security kind of like fascist type worlds, right? And Captain America is just kind of cool with just existing and living his life out, but a new documentary series comes out which is trying to claim that the Red Skull was actually a good guy. It brings him back out of hiding. He gets thrown into this situation that he didn't want to be a part of, but the call to fighting the war to save his country is still there. I loved the artwork. I loved the story. It was action-packed, had lots of cool ideas, lots of interesting interpretations of where the Marvel Universe can go, and interesting interpretations of the characters. So there you go. Flashing all over the place. A nice foil cover. That's what I picked up. There's a bunch of other covers, but this was a pretty solid book. Then we've got Cable issue number 1. Cable issue number 1, part of the fall of X, but even though the X is falling and Orcus and all that stuff, it has a little bit of ties to that, but it mostly has ties to old school Cable stories and characters because this is written by Fabian Nicieza and it's got artwork by Scott Eaton. So those are two old school creators who really were at the height of their talents back in the 90s. So this is a very old school feeling comic, but it doesn't necessarily feel like people... It doesn't feel like Fabian and Scott haven't adapted to the time, right? It's still wordy. It still has a lot of density to the story, like Fabian Nicieza's scripts did back in the day, but it doesn't get bogged down by it, right? It actually flows pretty well. It's pretty decent. So Fabian did a great job of kind of adapting to the modern style of comics, and I think he's been doing that in his own stuff. I think he's got a book on Webtoon or something like that. But the art's fine. The story is fine. Everything's decent about it. It's also a team-up of Cable with Kid Cable. Remember, there's another younger version of Cable running around, so they're teaming up, going up against a foe. It's interesting. It was all right. It didn't really blow me away, but what I was really impressed with was how Fabian and Scott were able to still use an old school kind of approach, but still make a new school feeling comic. So Cable issue 1 was all right. Then we got Jackpot issue number 1, part of the Gang War story. Jackpot is Mary Jane. She's got powers now. She's got this piece of technology on her wrist that she hits it and it's like a slot machine, and she gets these 3 things that pop up and she gets random powers. I think the whole idea is stupid. I thought it was stupid the entire time that this has been building up, and when it finally happened in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, I thought it was kind of dumb. This issue, though, isn't that dumb. It's all right. It's decent. It's just a nice little adventure for Mary Jane as Jackpot, teaming up with Spider-Man and She-Hulk just a little bit, but for the most part, focusing in on her abilities, how she is going to respond and react as a hero in the Marvel Universe. So it was actually okay. The script flowed well. The art was decent enough, so it wasn't a bad book. This is a one-shot comic. It is tied into Gang War, but it's not necessary for your understanding of Gang War. But it is just a one-shot, but there is a Jackpot Black Cat series coming in March. So if you're going to read that, you might want to start here. And if you're going to read this, you might want to read that really crappy Amazing Spider-Man story where that happened. Anyway, speaking of Amazing Spider-Man is here with issue number 42. This is the Marvel Masterpieces Volume 3 variant from Greg and Tim Hildebrandt. That is a dope cover. I remember this card. I remember this card set. I am resisting the urge to buy up every single one of these, but I think I might have to give in. I don't know. I love these covers, this throwback to Marvel Masterpieces Volume 3. What's happening inside of here, though? More of the Gang War stuff. It feels like it's the penultimate issue of Gang War. Even though we have some more tie-ins, everything really comes to a head here. And all of the whole entire reason why the Gang War happened and how it's set up to end is all revealed here, and it was pretty decent. It was all right. It wasn't as weak as some of the previous issues of Gang War Spider-Man have been. This book, though, has been a bit up and down, a bit inconsistent. The first part of this book I thought was ridiculous. I think Kingpin was acting so far out of character, it just kind of made me roll my eyes. But then the rest of the issue I kind of liked. These two opposing forces that are kind of coming to the climax of the Gang War story. That sounded funny. But I liked it. I liked that cover even more. All right. Then we got Daredevil here with issue number 5. Another one of those Marvel Masterpieces Volume 3 variants. There's an Iron Man one out this week too. I'm thinking about it. I really am. But anyway, Daredevil number 5. This was a pretty decent issue of Daredevil. Saladin Ahmed's been doing a really solid job on this title. Chip Zdarsky did a really solid run on Daredevil and left Daredevil dead, basically. But then he got resurrected, and he is now the priest at like an orphanage or a home or something like that for wayward children, right? In here, he kind of goes on a lunch date with She-Hulk. She-Hulk, while I was reading this, it was becoming obnoxious to me because I felt like She-Hulk was acting way out of character. There's a reason for that. As you get through the issue, it's very much still, even though it feels like a self-contained one-and-done issue, it's definitely part of the overall story that's building, and it starts even putting that overall story in a more refined perspective by the end of this book. We got a different artist on this book, and their name is Farid Karami. And I really like the art in the book. I thought the art was super cool. It's kind of nice. Got this like wonky, detailed kind of style that kind of made me feel like old school type stuff. But I liked it. Daredevil's been a solid book. It's solid this week. Fantastic Four is here with issue number 16. This is an issue that focuses in on the kids. Val and Franklin and Ben and Alicia's two kids. I can't ever remember their names, but the Kree kid and the Skrull kid. They're trying to... Val and Franklin are trying to impress their science teacher, and so they do a science experiment that goes awry. They try to hide it from their parents, and all kinds of hijinks ensue. It's a fun enough issue. It was decent. It was cool. The artist on here, it was okay. It's decent. But honestly, I think they kind of dumbed down the character of Val in this issue in order for this story to happen in the comedic way that it does. That kind of bothered me a little bit, but for the most part, it was a nice... kind of easy breezy self-contained comic. All right, Marvel's reprinting their Secret Wars series from the 80s. Gotta figure out how to hold these so it's not shining right at the camera. Oh, that angle works good. All right, so this is the original Secret Wars book from the 80s. I loved this when I was a kid. I was born and bred and raised on this when I was a kid. They're re-releasing them all with foil covers. So facsimiles and then foil facsimiles. And y'all, I'm such a sucker for this series. I'm such a sucker for foil covers that I'm a sucker and I'm going to buy these. Every single one of them, all 12 foil covers, I'm going to get, and I'm going to keep showing them off. All right, from Dynamite Comics, we got James Bond 007, issue number 1, a brand new start for James Bond, and it's written by Garth Ennis. Garth Ennis writing James Bond. There's only one cover for this too, which I think is astounding, especially considering Dynamite's practice when it comes to multiple covers. The art is by Rafa Labosco, and it's pretty solid. Jorge Subtle on the coloring. I liked the book. I thought it was good. Garth Ennis has got a good take on the character of James Bond, but more so, he's got a good take on how to make a violent comic book fun, but still have a little bit of weight of seriousness. The villain, or James Bond's mission is anchored by a really outlandish and ridiculous kind of weapon that's been some weapon or some technology that's been stolen. I thought that was kind of silly, but it fits in the world of James Bond because that's just how it is. All the characters work and act exactly as you would as you expect, and it's got that defining dark humor that Garth Ennis is known for. So if you're a Garth Ennis fan, I highly encourage you to check this out. And if you're a James Bond fan, I highly encourage you to check it out. Then we've got Army of Darkness Forever, issue number 4. Tony Fleece has been doing a great job of doing pretty much like a direct sequel to the original Army of Darkness. So the original Army of Darkness had an alternate ending. It was actually the original ending where Ash slept too long, woke up 100 years in the future of his future, 2093. He slept too long, woke up to a post-apocalyptic world. It's continuing that story as well as the story of the theatrical ending where Ash is in the S-Mart back in his own time, and also continuing the story of the medieval times and what's going on with Sheila, right? The chick and the wizard and all those people, and how the Deadites are still there, maybe trying to resurrect their master. There is a thread connecting all 3 of these stories together. I have a lot of fun with this series, and you can tell that the creative team has a lot of fun with it as well. All right, so there you go. Before we get into the pick of the week, cover of the week, and smell of the week, though, I want to point out that Crime Suspense Stories Volume 1 is out this week in paperback from Dark Horse. They've been doing these EC archives where they've been taking the old school EC stuff, Tales from the Crypt, Haunt of Fear, Vault of Horror, and all of them. Incredible science fiction, weird science, weird fantasy, and they've been putting them out in very affordable paperback editions. These are only $20, and it gets you some of the absolute best comics of all time by some of the greatest creators of all times, including Harvey Kurtzman, Jack Davis, Jack Kamen, Graham Ingalls, Johnny Craig, William Gaines, and Al Feldstein. This is so awesome to me. I've never been able to read any of the crime suspense stories. I, of course, have read a lot of Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and Haunt of Fear, but I love these new editions where I can have pretty decent recreations of these EC comics in paperback format and very affordable. All right. First up, cover of the week. Some people may say this is a cheat. Cover of the week is going to be Secret Wars Facsimile issue number 1, foil edition. Why? Because it's a classic, iconic cover that looks great, absolutely great in foil. So there's the cover of the week. Smell of the week goes to the Deviant issue number 3. It's got a very, it's got like a woodsy, vanilla-y, sweetie kind of smell to it that absolutely rocks, and even when you just hold it next to you, you kind of catch a whiff. And the pick of the week, Cobra Commander issue number 1. I've read this one a few times now. Weird science fiction horror. Cobra Commander is a badass. He's no longer some punk bitch-ass guy who's just going to run away from a fight. He's threatening. He's menacing. He's evil. This has roots back into the G.I. Joe movie, not the live-action one, but the animated series one. It's an interesting place to start the rise of Cobra, but it's a place to start the rise of Cobra that makes sense. I love this book. I did an entire video about this issue earlier this week, so check that out if you haven't already. So let's recap here. To recap, Avengers Twilight was actually a pretty solid alternate future timeline for the Avengers by Chip Zdarsky. Cable, an old school type approach, but still feels kind of in the new school by Fabian Nicieza and Scott Eaton. Jackpot wasn't as obnoxious as I thought it was going to be. Neither was Amazing Spider-Man. Daredevil is still on solid footing, even though at first I was a little bit, then it pulled it all together. Fantastic Four was a light enough, fun enough story, but it kind of neutered down the intelligence of Val just for the sake of that story. James Bond, great reboot. Garth Ennis doing what Garth Ennis does, but with James Bond. Army of Darkness, if you're a fan of the Evil Dead franchise, you need to be reading that book. Don't miss out on the EC archives. That's some of the greatest comic book art of all time. Cover of the week, the facsimile edition of Secret Wars number 1, the foil version. That's awesome. That might be a cheat for cover of the week, but I don't care. It works for me. Smell of the week is the Deviant, also an awesome issue. Pick of the week, Cobra Commander number 1. Thank you so much for your patience. Sorry we had to break it up, split it out over this stuff, but I've been doing a little bit of other videos here and there since I've had some time this week, so check those ones out as well. I did a review of the graphic novel Where the Body Was by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, check that out, and I've been clipping out the Marvel in the 90s section segments from Rockin' Robbie Live again and putting them back up. We just released the Weapon X one, so I don't know. If you like those things, just let me know. Watch them, comment, like, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, What did you read this week? What are you digging? What are you loving? Let us know. Thank you so much for checking out the video. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and join us over at patreon.com/PCP if you want to help support this channel. Thanks for rocking with us. Keep on reading. Station. Pop, pop. Boom!